Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Ready for Reentry webinar series. This is our part 3 series where we talk about our Ready for Reentry training. And so today I have with me Lindsay Sizemore and George Brock. They have worked together to create this training, and they actually do our training for the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, as well as they also have the privilege of going to other states in providing this training as well. My name is Heather James, and I am the Chief Training and Development Officer for Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. And I will let Lindsay and George introduce themselves.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Lindsay Sizemore, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. I am the Forensic Peer Mentor Training Project Director with the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. One cool thing, and I'll tell you a little bit more in a little bit, but I'm actually a product of this very program that I now direct. And so that right there is still to this day very mind-blowing and humbling and amazing. So I'm looking forward to being with you guys for this next hour. And with that, I'll introduce my co-facilitator, George Brott.
Thanks, Lindsay. It's good to be with y'all. I'm George Brott, and my background is actually in psychology. I am a licensed professional counselor and a certified professional counselor supervisor. Hopefully you won't hold that against me, but I am a co-founder of the Certified Addiction Recovery Empowerment Specialist Academy, or CARES Academy, and also of the Forensic Peer Mentor Ready for Reentry training. And so I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to spend some time talking about what is really near and dear to my heart. I've had one foot in the behavioral health world pretty much my whole career, and then one foot in the carceral system world. I worked for the parole board for about 27 years. Well, it was parole, and then the governor's office of transition support and reentry, and then the Department of Community Supervision. And at one point in my career, I decided it's important to kind of shift gears. And there's lots of resources for folks who are just starting early in their recovery. But what are we doing for people who are, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years into their progressive wellness or their recovery? And that's where the idea for the CARES Academy and the Forensic Peer Mentor Network training came from. And so with that, Rosin, I guess you want to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Yes, thank you. My name is Rosalind Hayes, and I am a person in long-term recovery and the Chief Operations Officer at the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. My job entails providing supervision and support for our 5 respite centers across the state of Georgia. And I am looking forward to hearing all about forensic peer mentoring and the fabulous training. So thank you.
But I paid my time, and a new life is gonna be mine.
So we have 3 primary objectives. By the end of this session, we'd like you to be able to describe the necessary components of the Forensic Peer Mentor Ready for Reentry training. We'd like for you to also be able to discuss the outcomes that we've achieved through this program, and then also identify what strong candidates look like for successful peer recovery mentor training and the delivery of peer recovery support services. Lindsay, you want to take this over?
Absolutely. Okay, so how did this whole thing get started? So I am so grateful to be able to work for the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network, which is pretty much known all over our country. We started in 1993, and we were the organization that worked so hard to get that certified peer specialist credential, Medicaid billable, And then we have an organization built today that has so many different trainings and opportunities that helps us continue to build a peer specialist workforce that promotes advocacy, further our education. We have so many different outreach programs, ultimately to help empower individuals and reduce the stigma that is all surrounded by mental health as well as substance use challenges. We believe that everyone has the right to live a meaningful life in a community of their choice. And when this particular justice involved peer specialists get into play, we also believe this also means regardless of any sort of criminal record. Okay. So how did we do it? Back in 2018, our organization, we sent in for we applied for a statewide consumer network grant. This is with SAMHSA, which is our Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. And we knew that we needed a training like this. Our incarceration rates were so high, yet we were leading in peer support therapy. And so we really wanted to try to even out these statistics, and we just saw a desperate need to get peer support into the prisons and into the justice involved. And so we applied for the grant, which we were awarded in 2018. This grant allowed us the ability to sit down and work together along with all of our allies, which I'm going to get into in just a second. And we began to build a Georgia-specific training, a training that is now called Ready for Reentry. And it is the training of forensic peer mentors across the state of Georgia that are now working in all justice settings. So at the beginning of this, the first 6 months pretty much looked like us going around to all 6 of our service regions. We hosted listening sessions. We invited every justice involved person we could possibly get out to the table. We used an appreciative inquiry approach. We asked, hey, what's working in this community? Where are there room for improvements? And then we finished up by just acknowledging and taking down all of the recovery champions that existed in each of these regions. We collected all that data, we sat down, we began to put together piece by piece the curriculum that we now use today. We wouldn't be able to do any of what we do without the allies at play. I'm sure you guys are fully aware of that by now if you're working in this field. Our top collaborators, our top allies that we have, that we regularly are involved with on a daily basis when it comes to this work is first our State Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities. Our partnership has allowed us to now we've trained as of last Friday, 260 forensic peer mentors in the state of Georgia. So that is definitely something to celebrate. Another huge partnership we have is our Department of Community Supervision. So we are directly connected to reentry services when it comes to returning citizens who are now out of being incarceration. They're in the community, they're reporting, they're under supervision. Everybody's sentence looks a little different, but we make sure to strengthen those relationships in the community because that is probably our most vulnerable place as a returning citizen. When we were first getting reacclimated back into the community, we're trying to build those supports. And so the Department of Community Supervision is a huge part. And honestly, I say this all the time, but I think that this is really where this program comes to life, which is in the community. This is when we're actually taking those action steps to rebuild. Moving on, another huge partnership that we have is with the Department of Corrections. And so we have 34 prisons all over the state of Georgia. So it is safe to say that we definitely know that we need to have some good relationships going with our correctional system. We have, this is actually where we started having positions was in the correctional system. And so now we have developed over the years relationships with our state offices of the Department of Corrections, all the way down to wardens, deputy wardens of care and treatment, officers, and we are regularly meeting with them, always trying to improve on our end and how we can continue to grow. And then, of course, the Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network is definitely a huge piece of this operation. As far as the forensic peer mentor overview, so what is a forensic peer mentor? In order to be a forensic peer mentor, you have to, and George, your screen went down.
Yeah. Don't worry.
So in order to be a forensic peer mentor, you are a certified peer specialist of either mental health or substance use. You have to have that prerequisite credential, which also is kind of saying, hey, I'm in long-term recovery as well. But the other thing the thing that actually makes you a forensic is that you also have the lived experience in the carceral system. So this means that you have been in jail, or you've been in prison, or you've spent some time under supervision. Okay. And so as a forensic peer mentor, we say that we operate from a perspective that everyone has the capacity to recover and to lead meaningful lives and to thrive. And it's really, really amazing because there's like thousands of us that are like role models out here doing it. And so that's the piece that makes a peer specialist an actual forensic peer mentor. So a forensic peer mentor has been out, they've received their peer specialist credential, they've come toe to toe with stigmas and barriers and all the things that kind of can happen for people when they have a criminal record. And then they're able to overcome that, rebuild, and then shine their light back on the people that probably haven't even seen that light before. All right, so we have lots of responsibilities. We actually have pages of a job description that is not on this slide, but for the most part, I think the biggest thing that we are role models. I say all the time, you know, we have so many people incarcerated or under supervision, and there's kids out here, their parents are incarcerated. They're getting raised by their neighbors. And so when I teach returning citizens to become forensic peer mentors, it is this vision that we constantly hold throughout the entire week of, we are building a connection with someone who probably has not ever seen anyone actually make it before. And so we get to be that light. We get to be that role model that says, hey, I've been here, I got out, I faced these challenges, I surrounded myself with support, and now I'm not only making it, I'm actually thriving in life. And I want to bring that kind of hope to you today. And so we get to be that for people, and it is truly amazing. So we are role models in that sense. But one also important, necessary thing that I think all of us who have been incarcerated before understand more than anyone is the need for resources, for the need for new information. And so as a forensic peer mentor, we get to link others to resources. We get to advocate and help a returning citizen navigate through this really, really inconsistent system. Okay. And we get to say, hey, let's talk to this counselor. Let's go to this officer on this day. We get to help make it a little bit easier to navigate a system in effort to get someone through the system versus going deeper into the system. In these regular sessions with the returning citizens, we get to highlight recovery skills that have worked for us. We get to lay out a buffet of options that maybe they might be interested in trying as well. And so recovery skills are just always at the forefront. They're always in our back pocket. We're ready to throw them down on the table. Hey, you know, this is something that really helped me heal in this way, or this one was really fun. Maybe I can model my day like this in order to overcome this particular barrier. And so recovery skills, communication skills, keeping that good perspective at play as you navigate a not easy system is really, really important. And knowing that you have that support beside you makes it feel a little bit more possible. And then the last piece is the community reintegration. And so, George?
Well, so I wanted to dig a little deeper into those recovery skills, because it sounds like to me you're talking about something that each individual really has to tap into about their own skills and abilities and strengths. So it could range from anything doing art to music to being a mountain hiker, and all sorts of things in between. It's not just going and sitting in a circle 90 and 90. You want to say a little bit more about that?
Right. It's definitely not sitting around in a group inside four walls. These are people who have hopes and dreams and interests and talents, and they may just need some support bringing that back out. You know, we talk about how we've entered into this system probably from a pretty traumatic place. We might have been a part of some things that just really weren't who we are, right? And so when we are safe, just like I feel like everyone, when you feel safe, creative things come out of you, and maybe you might want to go and hike a mountain, or pull out a palette of colors and paint a mural on you know, maybe you want to learn how to do that particular dance and take a class, or remember how to cook, or get back into school. I mean, these things are dreams that a lot of us put to the way, let it fall to the wayside. We've covered it up. We forgot about that because there's something about getting a number slapped behind your name, or going in having handcuffs on your wrist, that makes you forget that you actually have these dreams and hopes for your life. And so it's more than meetings. It's more than just that. There are so many unlimited ways to connect with our community that helps bring out that best version of ourselves. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yep. Okay, so here's a little breakdown of some of the listening sessions that I mentioned earlier. This was really important. We wanted to cover the whole state. We wanted to get as many voices heard as we could within the time period that we had. And so it was kind of like I felt like I was throwing a big get together, a big party, but yet I was inviting judges and officers, and we even had people who are currently incarcerated that were in a transitional center show up. We averaged probably about 60 people each session. And so we even had people, just family members, show up. And so it was important to allow this space to be heard. It was important for us to get some good data under our belt and to say, hey, this is what we're building, and we'd love for you to be a part of this process, because honestly, like, nothing that we do, not even our training, this peer support work, is done, without the input of all of our voices. And so we had things mentioned as far as improvements goes. Obviously, housing and employment are huge pieces when you have a criminal record. So there's always room for improvement with that, right? It's very hard to rebuild your life if you don't have a safe place to lay your head at night. And so we need access to medication, definitely. We have all these great systems at play, but are those systems working together? And so there's a unique place, and I'll share a little bit about that later, but that forensic peer mentors get to go in and advocate and get a plan that's out there and make it a stronger plan. And so we have some amazing recovery champions. I'm looking at this slide, George, and I'm thinking of like 20, at least 20 more that aren't even on the slide. But
Yep.
Programs like the Georgia Justice Project, I'll highlight just briefly. They actually have a session in our class on day 4, and they come in and they talk about the restoration of rights. They talk about record restrictions. They talk about ways that they've advocated at the Capitol, passed bills, and now we're getting people who have had these lengthy supervision sentences, and now they're off supervision altogether. Who's eligible to restrict this, or what? Just being armed with what your background says to begin with. And so that we know how to approach that job that we may want to go for. Things like recovery community organizations. We have community service boards that now have forensic peer mentors in there. So these are all important services that are out there when you're trying to rebuild. And I don't know if I said this earlier, forensic peer mentors work specifically with those who live with mental health and substance use challenges as well. And so having supports like community service boards at play is also very, very important, because we are not only dealing with those external barriers, but the internal barriers that are also needing to be addressed as well during that rebuild process.
So I want to talk about the basis or the background, the backbone of what this forensic peer training is all about. And it begins with the idea that behavior is always a function of the interaction between people and their environments. And the traditional approach in behavioral health is focused specifically on the P side of that formula, where all the problems are within the person. And the real kind of lightning bolt strike that brings people into a little different place in terms of providing these services is to recognize the role that the environment plays. And so it's about a set of principles that have evolved in criminal justice, in the academic criminal justice world, called crime desistance. And it's about the development of a pro-social identity, as well as having that sense of belonging within the community. And to give you an idea of this identity development that we're talking about, I want to invite Lindsay to just do her elevator speech.
All right, George, here we go. So my name is Lindsay Sizemore, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And what that means to me is it's been almost 11 years since I needed to change the way that I feel using any mind-altering substance. And it is through my experience with mental health, substance use challenges, homelessness, my mother dying by suicide, as well as being a returning citizen in the criminal justice system for years, that I now offer valuable contributions to my community simply by sharing my perspective and being evidence that recovery is real. The connection to recovery and the empowerment that I found in the Forensic Peer Mentor program began to interrupt the story that I was telling myself. It was when I realized that I wasn't alone that I began to create a new vision for myself. And this vision was much greater than my circumstances. Having consistent support, being taught to like a human being, and being taught how to focus on what was right began to feed the person I was becoming, not the person who I used to be. I went from never being able to communicate my feelings to sharing my whole heart with random strangers. From feeling like I had no voice to standing on the state capitol steps, delivering a speech to hundreds of people. I went from walking into prison and having that door locked behind me for years to now walking in and out of prisons all over the state of Georgia on purpose. From waking up and wearing orange every day to now waking up to wearing whatever I want. From walking around in circles in my cell to now running marathons all over the world. From running from the same police officers in the same system that I now sit at the same exact tables with, and we work together for positive change. I went from being considered a threat to my community to now having state and federal departments, as well as some of the largest recovery support systems on my team, and we work together to expand peer support throughout the criminal justice system. It is recovery that fed my heart hope and compassion, and the internal freedom that I experience every day has made everything worth the fight. Today, recovery is the expectation. I look at it in the face every single day. Thanks, George.
Nice. So I want you to kind of think about what you heard Lindsay say, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in just a moment. But the approach that we're talking about, the strange term crime desistance, comes from the work of Fergus McNeil and several others, primarily folks who are in Europe. It's starting to take hold in the United States, but anyway, there's a way of looking at crime desistance that moves beyond the traditional approach in criminal justice that focuses specifically on risk, need, and responsivity. That's the traditional approach. You assess a person's risk, you identify what level of what their needs are, and you address those, and then you monitor how responsive the individual is to those interactions and the service offerings that are made available. Well, the crime desistance approach lists 3 research-based factors that are important for desistance. The first one just simply says people will physically mature out of committing crime, or at least committing as many crimes as they used to. The older we get, the less likely it is we're going to commit crimes. Secondly, there are social connections that are involved in the development of a pro-social identity. In other words, it's not just the number of connections or networks, but it's the quality of those connections that matter. And so marriage, getting a job, having a social group that you hang out with and have fun with or go to church with, all of those contribute to the development of this pro-social identity. And then lastly, the third factor is the individual's identity, how they see themselves, how they label themselves, and equally important, how others see them and label them and with what consequences. And so it's about sort of changing that view of myself as an offender. And by the way, is there any word that's more offensive that you could use to describe somebody than offender? I mean, it's right there in the word. And that's why we typically don't use it. We talk about returning citizens because that's where people are headed. Ideally, folks are going to return to their communities. They're going to make contributions that are valued, and their citizenship will be fully restored. But that leads us to the second issue in terms of desistance theory, which has to do with the 4 forms of simultaneous rehabilitation. And it's about people having the skills, capacities, attributes, and motivation of the individual to change. And that's on the basic personal level. Secondly, again, in terms of social rehabilitation, how is the person de or relabeled in the community? Are you willing to graft folks back into roles that are valued by themselves as well as the groups to which they belong? And then thirdly, what is the moral rehabilitation that's going on? And this is kind of a big one because the state and the community owe a retributive debt to end punishment. And that's a tough one. That's a hard concept for a lot of folks to embrace, because the idea is that, well, if you've committed so many crimes that you've been to prison, chances are you're going to continue to commit those crimes. Well, we actually know that that's not true, and that punishment is not something that has to continue in order for people to convert antisocial to pro-social behavior. In fact, the research is really, really clear. The most effective programs are those that offer rewards or positive sanctions on a ratio of 4-to-1 to negative sanctions or punishments. And so it's about being able to lift people up, celebrate their strengths, their skills, and their abilities, and to do so in a way that invites the community to recognize the talent, skills, and the abilities of that individual. And then the last form of rehabilitation has to do with judicial. How are we able to modify the criminal history so that it's not accessible to everybody? Most states do expungements. We don't do that in Georgia. We might forgive, but we don't forget in Georgia, unfortunately. But there's other aspects to this. How do you get a pardon? How do you get a requalification for an occupation that you are qualified to participate in? And again, it's about fully restoring that person's sense of citizenship that is so vital. So let me go back to what you heard Lindsay talk about, and notice that what she described was a really interesting transformation that has occurred. And the research is pretty clear. This kind of identity transformation, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And in fact, it's somewhere between 1 to 3 years that people are actually able to begin to think of themselves as something other than I'm a convict, or I'm an inmate, or I'm an offender. And it takes this group of people in the community lifting folks up and saying, we value you and you belong here, that really contributes to this. And so it's a way of helping people begin their own identity transformation by having them deliver what we call a elevator speech. And that's where it really becomes a tool for them to begin to redefine themselves.
And I'll say this as well, you know, it took a while for me to really realize this, but you know, being someone with a criminal record, trying to rebuild, you know, we stigmatize ourselves in a way. And when we can build these elevator speeches, these ways of communicating transformation in a very short amount of time, it is like our greatest tool. It's like you're armed with an elevator speech no matter where you walk in, whether it's, we say, the grocery store or in your family, at Thanksgiving or Christmas. You know, when we walk into these prisons or we walk into these jails or we walk into these meetings, we now are armed with something that is strength-based, that shows transformation, that defines a forensic peer mentor, and that is also showing the value of what it is we bring to our community in a very short amount of time. And so I tell people, yes, we are here to give hope, give resources, and support other people and do peer support therapy. But what we also get to do is we get to change the system from the inside out by, you know, defining the role. Hey, I'm Lindsay Sizemore and I'm a forensic peer mentor, and I get to do this, this, and this every single day because of my lived experience. And then when I have those conversations, even if it's very brief with an officer or a warden or a judge, all of a sudden I've at least started this conversation. I've planted enough seeds to hopefully be asked later, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. And then all of a sudden, not only am I making an impact with returning citizens, but I'm also transforming and making an impact through the relationships with the professional staff.
Nice. So hopefully you get the sense that this is more than just what is expected of the person. It's what's expected of the community or the environments in which people return once they have paid their debt in terms of incarceration or being locked up. And it really does take a village in order to promote this notion of crime desistance. So this is at the heart of what we incorporate into the Ready for Reentry training. So in a sense, you could say this is an evidence-based practice, but more importantly, it's about us developing practice-based evidence of effectiveness. So the training is a 40-hour training. It starts at 9 o'clock on Monday and ends at 5 o'clock on Friday. Well, not completely, but 8 to 5 each day, Monday through Friday. And that includes working lunches. So it's a fairly intense training. And we have facilitators from each of our allies who will come on and talk about what it's like to work within, say, a prison or work within a day reporting center. What it's like to have your your colleagues be people who previously you may have been afraid of or didn't like in terms of officers. And so it really is about helping people see that there are resources that are available that maybe they can take advantage of and or connect their peers with as a result of the work that we do. And
Yeah.
so
Go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, so I was also going to say it's so important that we have facilitators from each of these different levels of the justice system, because in this training, we are trying to train and educate and prepare every single returning citizen for what to expect. And what better way to do that than to have the people who are in office or running this division to come in and, first of all, tell us what it is they do. What does it look like for you? What is your vision and your passion? Okay, now we see that you value this work. Now we are having conversations together. And then we're also able to say, you know, not every day is going to be sunshine and roses. And we're able to prepare and we're able to discuss these situations and these environments in a much deeper way by having these facilitators there, by walking through every single, SAMHSA says intercepts, every single part that a returning citizen goes through, from court to jail to prison to the community and so on. And so it's really amazing to have people who are actually working in these departments come in and have the opportunity to really just talk about what it is they do and their vision. They actually really value it and appreciate it, and even look forward to coming to be in these trainings. What we take from each of those sessions is invaluable.
So one of the highlights of the training is on Friday afternoons. Folks who want to be forensic peer mentors have to get up in front of the class and deliver an elevator speech. And I often will tell them, you don't have to, but if you don't, you won't be a forensic peer mentor. But you hopefully get a sense of the importance of that elevator speech. It's not your typical drunk-a-log or this is how awful my life used to be kind of story. What you heard Lindsay describe were the transitions. I was that, and now I'm this. And it's helping people to really grasp and hold on to those aspects of themselves, because we all are so much more than the worst thing we've ever done in our lives.
Yeah.
And so this is a way of helping people begin to own their recovery and to own their progressive wellness. And the fact that they're able to manage their behavioral health symptoms and to live effectively within the community is what the elevator speech really is about highlighting. So I don't know how much of this we really want to go into, but
so this just shows currently what prisons we are in. We have 2 organizations that contract out forensic peer mentor positions. But when looking at this particular slide, it just shows, for me at least, it just shows absolute growth. There was a moment there where we were only in 2 prisons and maybe just a handful of day reporting centers. We're now in 27 Department of Corrections sites. So this just shows growth. I don't know what's next, George, but I would like to say a little bit more about some of the pieces of the curriculum.
Sure.
But real quick, we will look at this too, as on top of the growth that's taking place. We have really branched out into our accountability court settings. And so we are able, these are all diversion programs to prevent, like, what they say high risk offenders should instead of going and serving prison time or being incarcerated, they can take advantage if they're eligible for some of these diversion programs. So we have these numbers up here of where forensic peer mentors work, which is really, really awesome. And just the fact that we have the unique opportunity to advocate before someone even gets sentenced is just, it's just amazing. But go ahead and go to the next slide real quick.
So
Okay.
our main goals, are to reduce recidivism and to reduce psychiatric hospital readmissions.
Okay. And we have some really good percentages going on here, from rearrest to any sort of revocation from supervision and inpatient admissions. You'll see our numbers are really, really low, which is the direct result of working with someone with lived experience, who is certified as a forensic peer mentor.
And so in the Georgia Department of Corrections, there is a 5-level mental health system, with 1 being no identifiable mental health challenges, 2, 3, and 4, meaning you have some sort of behavioral health diagnosis. 3, 4, and 5s are folks who need some sort of specialized housing situation. They're not housed in the GDC dorms, in other words. And so everybody that is assigned a forensic peer mentor in prison is of a sufficient mental health level. And these are some pretty amazing results, because the challenge is being able to hook those people up with the resources that will allow them to really flourish when they get in the community. And it looks like it's working very, very well.
And so it most definitely is working, George. This slide is a little outdated. We have close to 6,000 returning citizens as of the end of 2023, of returning citizens that have worked and received services from a forensic peer mentor. And so our numbers continue to grow, just as our positions continue to grow as well. That's a lot of people's lives impacted. And then I go further with it. It's all the families that are also connected to those lives. And me personally going through this program and having a forensic peer mentor, and then having that support from 1 forensic peer mentor, and then to look at what my life is today, and then to see numbers like that, and to think of all of those people's lives that have this hope as well. It's just an incredible feeling. So we have peers we've talked about in the community. We keep track of a few things, like who's receiving benefits, how many people have received housing. Is there been incidences of homelessness? And so this kind of stuff is easier to track when someone is either in a prison or in a day reporting center. So we do our best to try to keep up with this data. You guys, data is going to be so important as you build this out in your states as well. And so we have a couple good years of some good data, and so we are really excited about having some numbers to really, back up everything that we're saying as far as why this is working. And so hopefully these numbers are giving you some hope as well. Okay, so before we go to this part real quick, I want to touch just a little bit on, we talked about elevator speeches and that being a huge piece to, the way that we feel empowered, the way that we can show transformation, the way that we can make an impact within the system. But we also, and we talked about facilitators from every level that come in and speak throughout the course of the week. We also have a good session on how to improve criminal responses by being trauma informed. We talk about pieces of intentional peer support. If some of you guys have heard about that, how to be intentional when we are meeting with each other so that we create something called mutually beneficial relationships with each other. This is how we take care of that whole relationship. I always tell everyone in the class, we have this opportunity to build a type of connection with someone that, most of people have never had before. Right? It's a relationship to where even with my own belief system and your own belief system, together we can create something new, something strong. And instead of letting certain things like cause us to disconnect from each other, we are able to, we're able to talk about what we need in the relationship. And so it's very intentional things. We try to prepare every forensic peer mentor, with tools of how to just take advantage of these opportunities when we're together so that we can get people to healing faster. And there's a lot of amazing worksheets where we can have a returning citizen who's maybe reporting to their supervision officer, and they can take these tools and they can change the dialogue. You know, most people that are reporting to their supervision officer are, you know, having to take their drug screen. They're having to, you know, check off those few boxes that those officers ask. A lot of people are a little weary because a lot of people don't have the best relationships with these officers, or let's face it, it's just connected to what it was like being incarcerated, and they feel like they just have to do this and, you know, do it and get out of there. But we have tools where we encourage returning citizens now to take note of everything that you're proud of throughout that month, throughout those few weeks, even if it doesn't seem relevant to anyone else. If you're proud of it, if you went to 3 job interviews and you called your father every Friday night for the past 4 weeks working on a relationship, if you've done things that you're proud of, or you led a group last night, you write it down. And then when you go to your supervision officer, after they ask you about their few things, we talk about, why don't you turn that piece of paper around and say, hey, officer, I want to also tell you about some things that I've been doing. And right there in that moment, the person is feeling empowered, they're sharing things that are important, and they're developing a relationship with this officer now that's self-directed. It's self-directed, and now the officer becomes more of just this person I'm reporting to. The officer is now learning from this returning citizen. They're learning about who they are and what's important to them. And it's just a really cool way that we found to help empower and help someone navigate through, you know, the sentence that they're still serving, in a sense. On top of the trauma, on top of tools, things like RAP, we teach the wellness recovery action plan. We also know that we can't do any of this work without self-care. And so we have a huge self-care component of this class. And then we just continue to hear, like we said, the Georgia Justice Project, this group of lawyers that help us really get a good grasp on our criminal record, what it looks like, what we're able to do with it. And yes, we can soak it all up for our own personal lives. But a lot of what we're doing also is preparing us for every single returning citizen that we're going to be able to serve as well. Good, true, updated knowledge is so important in this field. And so we tell forensic peer mentors, you don't have to know everything, right? But what we want you to be able to do is know who to go to who has that answer, right? So we don't have to know every single resource, but we'll show you who's over what region and who's over housing and who's over this particular employment fair and all the things that we as long as we know who to go to, then we can find that answer for that person.
We also have a major section in the curriculum on ethics and how do you do ethical decision making? Because one of the challenges that we often find with forensic peer mentors is you're going back into work in environments that you previously found very disgusting or found very unpleasant to be in. And so it can certainly be a challenge to go in with the attitude of I am going to be positive and I'm going to be participatory, and my job is to help people who are working through whether or not they believe the folks that we're working with are going to make it. Because the challenge is that, you know, often the sense is, yeah, you're the exception instead of the rule. If you actually are a pro-social person and you're living in recovery, you just somehow got lucky. And it's about helping us teach others, including the staffs that we work with, that this is a very real thing. It's not an anomaly. And so the ethics piece really gets people in touch with the fact that you're moved into something other than just being a returning citizen. you're now representing this community of people who not only are in recovery, but who have begun to live a crime desistance lifestyle. And knowing how to navigate that and experiencing the disappointments that come with the challenges that are experienced can be really devastating. And it's necessary for us to get together periodically and to support each other.
Yes.
So, Liz, you want to tell us about the learning
Oh, no.
communities?
I knew it. I knew that's what you were about to say. Absolutely. So just because the training ends on at 5 o'clock on Friday doesn't mean that it's over. It's actually, the work is just beginning. But for us, we also know that it is important, especially as we grow to the numbers that we're growing to at this pace. It is so important that we meet. We have what's called a learning community session, where every certified forensic peer mentor gets invited. And so we have a session, usually it's once a month. Or the way that's falling now, because we're training so many, it's usually every month that we don't have a training. But we'll meet for about an hour and 15 minutes. Everyone that's available will be able to come. We have a pre-assignment. Usually it's something, a skill or a tool or something to revisit from the actual training. So we'll start out with a pre-assignment. We'll check in with each other. We have this opportunity to share resources. We all know different times of the year, there's different things that are more relevant. And so we have so many forensics out in the field that may have a situation or they're looking for a particular resource. So we're not alone. We get to connect together. We get to use this as a platform to share what's going on, to share these resources with each other. But probably my favorite part of those learning community sessions is going to be, we have 2 speakers that come on, right? The first one is a VIP highlighted forensic peer mentor. They know if I'm calling them on a random day for some reason, they're probably about to get asked to be the forensic peer mentor, the highlighted VIP for the learning community session. And so we give this opportunity to someone to be able to share who they are, how they got into this field, what their day looks like as a forensic peer mentor in whatever setting they're working in. We get the chance to celebrate them, ask them questions, and connect with them. Just because you are in one cohort or training doesn't mean you know all the other ones. And we've been training now for years. So it's so cool to get to see people connect with people they don't know as well. And then the last speaker that we have is a VIP ally speaker. So this ally speaker is the only person in this entire session that doesn't have the lived experience inside. They're not justice involved, right? And so we choose an ally speaker. This could be an employer that hires returning citizens. This could be someone who's doing research at a college. This could be an actual officer. Maybe it's somebody who works at the Department of Community Supervision. And so I will call, maybe it's a counselor, maybe it's a chaplain, maybe it's someone who works and who has a passion with returning citizens. However, they don't necessarily have the lived experience with the handcuffs and the criminal records and all of that. And so we give them this platform to also be a part of this with us. Because like we've said this entire hour, it is so key that we work together in order to do this work. And so to be able to highlight an ally speaker like this, not only does it make them feel extremely valuable and kind of reignites, their why, but we get to continue building up our support. We get to just keep filling up the bag with more and more support. And so it's a win-win. And so we're excited about our learning community sessions. It's a great way to stay connected, and I think it's absolutely needed. We can't just be training a bunch of people and having this great work and then not having a way for us to continue to stay connected. So
the bottom line model that we use in this training is called the social model of recovery. And it's peer support services are a non-clinical enhancement. In other words, we're not trying to replace clinical services. But the social model was developed by a group out in California, in particular, Thomasina Borkman, And her approach can be summed up by saying you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. And that's the foundation or the basis for the forensic peer mentor training. So hopefully now you understand the necessary components of the training. You are able to recognize or discuss the outcomes that we've achieved, and you understand the qualities that make for a successful forensic peer mentor who can deliver effective peer support training.
Thank you so much, George and Lindsay. Before we end today's presentation, I think there's a couple of questions in the chat. One person put, not sure if I missed it, but does working in a judicial system count as lived experience?
Yeah.
So if they have had a criminal record or they've been incarcerated themselves, or under any sort of supervision personally, that would be lived experience.
And then I know a person asked about if this webinar will be available, is it recorded, or would they receive the PowerPoint slide? And so the response is yes, this webinar is recorded. You can access it by going to the Southeast MHCTC website, and you can rewatch this webinar. Give it about a day or two to get posted. And Southeast, they can also email out the presentation to you guys as well. With that said, I want to say thank everybody so much for joining us. Please remember to do the survey. The link has been dropped in the chat, as well as there will be an email sent to you. In order to get your CEUs, you must complete this survey. So once again, thank you so much, Lindsay and George, for joining us, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, George.